Okay, we are back after, what has it been?
3 weeks.
3 weeks?
2 or 3
I think it's been 3 weeks since we've done a Facebook Live, because last week we just kind of talked about our China visit. The week before that we were in China, so it's been we skipped 2, so it's been 3 weeks. So piano talk, that's what we're doing today. And where we left off, for all of you religious subscribers, watchers, where we left off, our cliffhanger, I know, major cliffhanger, is we're about to hang grand hammers. So we have not progressed at all on that project intentionally for this morning.
Good morning, Curtis Biggs.
Curtis Biggs, awesome, great.
Wow.
Curtis is such a diehard. So Curtis, if you remember, intrepid subscriber, we were about to hang hammers. What we did last time is we determined the strike point. Let's go over to that piano, and this is going to be Jake's project. This is going to be Jake's very first installation of a set of grand hammers, and so we're gonna get him started on that. So let's go over to the pianos.
Oh, we didn't turn lights on yet. Say hi, everyone. Hello. Hello, Jake. Hello, Jonathan. Curtis, it's good to see you.
Just for your information.
Let's put this over. Don, will you pull that back light? So what we did is we determined, just as a quick review, we determined the optimal strike point of the where the hammer goes on the shank by, we took the empty shank. Kind of looks like this. This is, of course, this is an upright shank, but you get the idea. And we, because we've already bored the holes in the new hammers, it doesn't fit super snug. There's some wiggle room. It fits pretty good, but not so tight that if you put it in the piano and play it, it kind of the hammer kind of wiggles around. Yeah, moves around a little bit. So what we did is we took a piece of masking tape and just wrapped it around so that now the hole in the new hammer is nice and tight. Put it on there, kind of wedged it on there, and the tape started to get kind of bunched up, which is when you know it's good, you know it's nice and tight. And then we put the hammer in and out, or the action in and out, playing it, adjusting it, take it out, put it back in, listen to it in and out until we find the right point. Right? So that's the process that we did that by ear, determining the optimal strike point.
Good morning, David Pastana.
Oh, cool. Pastana. Awesome. David Pastana is also a Facebook Live guy. He's done a lot of that. Okay, where's the action? Got the hammer hanging jig here. Let's go get the piano action. Is it in the piano? Oh, yes. Okay. Let's just double check. Let's before you take it all the way out, Jake. That closed, I guess. So the most sensitive point is up here at the top. This number, string number 88, It's the most sensitive point because the string segment is only, I don't know, it's only about that long, something like that. And so it really makes a huge difference, just the tiny little movements of where that hammer is actually contacting the string. So if it's just a tiny bit forward or a tiny bit back, it's going to make a big difference in the tonal quality of the note. And so
you adjust that by ear?
yeah, you do this by ear. Exactly. So what we've done, what I was explaining just a minute ago, is we've taken the hammer, we put masking tape around it to increase the diameter of the shank, and put the hammer on and just kind of went in and out determining, okay, what sounds good. And unless it's moved in the last 3 weeks since we've done this, the hammer should still be in what we determined at the time to be the best point. What is it catching on?
Is it the side that the spring's on? The spring's usually on this side, right?
Hello, Jeremy Johansson and Steve Sumption, sorry. I said it wrong. Hi. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Okay. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to get this action here in and figure it out in just a second. What's blocking it? And then we're gonna play this note, and I'm just going to demonstrate that just little movements of the action in and out, which change the strike point of the string as I move it in and out, that it dramatically changes the tonal quality of that note. And then we're going to hang all of the hammers in a beautiful straight line from this one note. Now what Ravenscroft, Michael, what's his last name? Somebody Google Michael Ravenscroft. Mike Spreeman. What he does, so Mike Spreeman builds high-end pianos in Arizona. He builds like one a year, and he sells them to like universities and kind of high-end users of pianos, concert venues, that sort of thing. Come on. And what he does for this is rather than favoring a straight line, I took a class from him a few years ago at the down in Arizona, and rather than hang his hammers in a perfectly straight line, he actually he said that every third hammer he does this on. So his hammer line won't be perfectly straight. His hammer line will actually be slightly kind of wavy. And his feeling is he doesn't care if the action is in a perfect straight line, which I find interesting. Because yeah, from a functional standpoint, who cares if the hammer's in a straight line or not? You see anything blocking?
No, so you got to hook this in on the spring and then compress it that way to get that.
I'm thinking that Sylvia will probably put this.
So Jeremy Johansson says, "Hi, it's been a long time. How much is it to have Brigham come tune our piano after we move next week?"
Do you want to answer that, Stacey?
Yeah. Brigham's booked out a few months, but I can have Emmeline call you as soon as she gets in. She kind of runs the tuning schedule. But yeah, it's $140 for a tuning. We'd be happy to tune your piano.
There's another screw here.
Let's get
I
that.
thought it was going to miss, but it didn't.
Let's get that screw out. I guess when it was refinished. So wait, before you get in there, Watch out for that.
Yeah,
hammer.
this piano used to be kind of a brown color. It looks
Can you
really
read-
good
Will you
now.
get a screwdriver, Phil, or a flash
Straight.
screwdriver? So I think that was it. When it was this piano was actually refinished while we were in China, and I think that's what was blocking. It was a refinisher put these screws in, but didn't put them in all the way, and so they were kind of blocking the action from going all the way in. Okay, so back to Mike Spreeman. I really like I like his theory from a functional standpoint. I think he's dead on. That again, what he's doing is he's changing that hammer line according to essentially what his ear is dictating as the best tone on each, as opposed to just determining one strike point based on one note and then fixing that strike point all along the action. I guess there's kind of there's a maybe aesthetic anal side of me that doesn't like it, because like a visual aesthetic. He's going for acoustic aesthetics, which obviously, like, that's the point of the piano, is to be acoustically aesthetic. So he's totally right, but I just have a hard time getting over the idea of the visual aesthetics of that hammer line being wavy. So I think he's probably taking the higher road.
Does he make his own plates?
He does.
Wow.
That way too. Be a lot harder.
Good question. And from what I understand, the plate cools in a fairly unpredictable way. That it's a process that, you know, even though like major metal foundry processes have been around for almost 200 years, it's still kind of an inexact science in some ways, at least for cast iron. And you do see, and this is not anything that I have personal experience with. I've never manufactured my own plate. I've only read about it, and I've seen pictures of manufacturers that will be grinding their plates even after they're cooled and the plates are ready. They'll go back and grind them and kind of smooth things out and perfect them by hand after they've been the plate itself has been manufactured. So I don't know the answer to that. The only thing that, and it would be cool if we could contact Mike Spreeman and kind of get his thoughts on this. I don't want to call him in Arizona at 6:30 in the morning. Is it
They're an hour
5:30?
earlier, yeah.
So it's 5:30 in the morning right now? Yeah.
Wait, not like us.
Yeah, maybe not. He's a very gracious guy, but not that gracious probably. So the answer, the only thing that I can think of is that I would guess that even if you were to go back and grind the plate, so just to clarify for people that are watching, let's look at this to clarify what Scott's question is.
Hey, Mark Veenman. Thanks for watching.
Okay, have a look down here.
Sure.
So the string segment that's actually ringing, it starts just under this metal plate here, and it ends where the bridge begins. So that's the little string segment that in this piano is only that long on note 88. So where the hammer strikes is very, very sensitive. and as you get head towards the base side, it gets larger and larger and larger, so the exact point matters less and less. So like in the base, where the strings are several feet long, a microscopic movement of the action one way or the other isn't really tonally evident. But in the top end, again, it is. And so so when the cast iron plate, this is a one-piece cast iron plate, which, as we know from our history reading, was an invention or an innovation by Chickering, right? Wasn't it Chickering that did that like in 1845? That before that, plates were manufactured in several pieces. So there'd be like the part that covers the pin block, the part that covers the back, and they'd be connected with bolts and struts and then massive wooden beams underneath. But then Chickering in about 1845, they came up with the one-piece cast iron plate. And so the entire, we actually saw this in China. We saw the, it was a mold, I guess, wasn't it? Where it was a negative, I
Yeah,
think.
it was like a stamp.
Yeah.
Stamp.
So they would take, and Stacy will be posting it on our China videos. So they would take. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the foundry. The foundry was like 3 hours away from where we were. That would have been awesome, though, to see it. So they take this massive piece of steel, or whatever. Maybe that was, who knows what? I don't know what it was made of. It looked like steel, and they'd put it on some sort of a hoist, flip it upside down, and then it would make an impression in sand. In a type of sand, I guess, that's very fine. And is a wet sand.
Not
Anyway.
long.
Yeah, right. It's a very fine sand with the idea that it's kind of, I think the finer the sand, the finer the detail of the impression. And then that's removed, and then cast iron is poured into that impression, and it creates the plate. And then you pull the plate out, and there you have your plate. But then it takes all sorts of machining, and you have to cut things off and refine it, and manufacture the plate. Mill, yeah, something like that. Grind it all over the place. And so what Scott's question, and the way it cools is kind of unpredictable. So as precise as that negative is in the sand, when it cools, it doesn't cool, I guess, in exactly a straight line or exactly the shape of the negative. It's close, but not as precise as well piano manufacturers would like it. So what Scott's saying is why not just go back and grind it so that it's in a perfect straight line? And in theory, I guess that sounds like a good idea. I guess the only question that comes to my mind is, like, when you're grinding in a straight line, how do you know that what you're grinding it to is going to be acoustically the best? Just because it's a straight line, just because in theory, like the mathematics on paper work out,
You can't check the sound while you're doing it.
you can't check the sound while you're doing it. You don't know. I mean,
Plus, when it's
so many
upside
factors.
down, the actual fulcrum where the strings go under, that's not being cast. That's at the top of the cast because
It's flipped upside down.
Yeah, so they have to somehow grind that little ridge for where the strings terminate.
I see what you're saying. I don't know.
I don't know how that works.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So they're essentially having to custom
Create
manufacture,
that after
create
the
that
fact,
after.
maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That would be really cool to interview someone who has
Yeah.
experience, who has personal experience with either designing or actually creating that. So
The
I
bus
think,
ride 3 hours up to the foundry. Then.
well, so yeah, in the case of Hailuan, the foundry was 3 hours away from their factories. But in the case of Mike Spreeman, his foundry is in Vienna, I think he said.
Wow.
So he makes one a year, and I guess he ships them plans or whatever. He didn't get into that, but I'm just making assumptions. Maybe he emails them CAD drawings and says make this, and then they ship this approximately 600-pound giant cast iron plate from Vienna to Arizona. Probably not a very cheap process. Anyway. Okay.
So is it that foundry? There.
Nowadays, I think.
Yeah. They don't have a stand. When people stand in Hardman, they don't have a stand to stand in the stand, so they're looking at
You have to create them.
they don't have portions of stands. Then they connect the dots. They're sculpting in the sand. Carve out the road. That's interesting.
Good morning, Carrie. Thanks for watching.
So I'm thinking maybe the dampers.
Oh, because we don't have metal yet.
Yeah, we don't have. Could also be this. But something is interfering.
Leave the light. This is a Christmas light.
Anything?
Felt back there, but other than that.
Going all this effort just to
Get it in.
review what we did 3 weeks ago. I think that's in now.
Looks like it.
Okay.
I heard it
Yeah.
clunk.
So I think it was the damper tray. It was interfering. Okay. So that sounds like, I mean, for a piano this size, what is this? About a 5'2", something like that. Not a very big piano, but that's a pretty good tone. So I think, I mean, we'll experiment with this in a second, but I think that the hammer hasn't moved in the 3 weeks. Nobody's bumped it or whatever. So let's pull it out slightly. Why don't you get a shot of how little I'll move it. Oh, and then we grab me a screwdriver. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a screwdriver under here and lift the action up just like that. So I can do it from under here too.
Good morning, Isaac.
So what that's doing, as I lift up the action, is it's moving the hammer back a little bit, and then I'll also pull the action forward, which I don't, which I can do just by pulling it out, and then it'll change the strike point more towards the pianist, or if I use the screwdriver, it'll change the strike point more away from the pianist. Okay, so that's the one that we determined to be our favorite 3 weeks ago. And as I lift it up, you can see it really weakens. I don't know if that's coming through on this Facebook Live video, but it's pretty obvious, I think, to all of us how much just moving that really changed it. Then I'll pull it out. Didn't pull it out much. And then when I push it back in, it really comes alive. Okay? So okay, confirmed that we've got the right spot? We found the sweet spot. Let's take it out. Try not to touch the key while I pull it out. Mess that up.
Yeah, they said they could hear it pretty well.
Okay, cool.
Nice. Glad that's working.
All right. Grab the other end of that. We're going out with it. Brigham, did you follow that? Did you follow what we were doing there?
Not really.
Not really? Okay, so Don, let's put it, well, we'll take the stack off, which I think we only have 4 screws on the stack right now. Here you go, Jake. So take out the screw there and screw there. And don't bump this hammer, because that's like our model. Right. So we can, by the way, later on, after the all of the hammers have been installed, we can make micro adjustments to the to where the action is placed. So we determined that this is the ideal place for the hammer, based on like our best judgment, based on where the action is kind of bottoming out in that action cavity. Okay, grab the keys. But after things are in, if for whatever reason we determine later on that maybe if it were slightly further back or slightly forward, we can do that. We can make adjustments in the key bed so that if we do change our mind, at least, I mean, within limits, we can't go far, but we know we're not going to have to go far. We can change that so that when the like we can add material or remove some material, we can actually change the positioning of it's called the DAG, is the little block at the end of the action when we push the action in. That's what stops the action at a very precise point. We can actually move that slightly one way or the other, so that the new position is okay. I'm gonna flip this around. Okay. Do you know where the hammer's on? Grab those.
Spindles are quite as long as the new engine. Where that's positioned, it's just barely on.
Good point.
What was that?
These newer shanks are longer, and it's kind of to the end of the longer shank almost.
The older ones have been trimmed farther back.
So these may not be quite as long as you want.
Is this the hammer
So-
that we did the jigs on?
Yes, I was just about to talk about that. You read my mind. So this is going back now about a month or more. We got a raw set of hammers, and we prepped them by boring them, determining the bore distance, the bore angle, the rake, by coving them there, by rounding by arcing the tails, which is that, and by tapering them. So every one of those procedures is a different jig, different procedure to do that. So Brigham, do you want to help me put these more or less in order? The ones that Scott needs are
What's this? Is that 61?
yes, it is. I guess while we're doing this, now would be a great time if anyone watching on Facebook Live has any comments. Be happy to attempt anyway to.
Hey Scott, what are you doing?
So I'm setting up the jig. So it has a couple different stops on it. So there's this stop for the bottom and then this adjustable stop
Nice.
for the top angle. And so I'm setting it to the hammer that we've already put in place, and then we'll be able to line up the rest just on this straight line here.
While the shanks are still in the action, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Where did we get this piano? Do you remember? It looks a lot better refinished.
It does. It looks
It's
great.
amazing. New
Yeah.
piano.
It does. It totally looks like. a
And
new
Jake, you
piano.
did the cleaning on it, right?
I did.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was.
I almost didn't recognize it once it was refinished.
And we actually on that. So it's been transformed already. Maybe while they finish up this, let's go.
What does this say?
So it's that direction. Read it
Need
in
more
that
than
direction.
one plan.
Let's
It
go
says
over to the
95.
piano.
I didn't even recognize it
Totally.
when I got back.
So before we went to China, it was
I think I have a before picture, so I'll have
Do
to
you?
post that with it. But
okay. So cosmetically, it was terrible. It was kind of a light oak kind of color, but it was just trashed. It's about a 90-year-old piano. It's from the 1920s, something like that. And cosmetically, it was in terrible condition. And so when we came back from China, it was refinished in this kind of satin
so
black
pretty.
lacquer. Really a beautiful job that Julio did. And then we did kind of an experiment. Oh, and then also he
Those are
redid.
beautiful.
Those are the original hinges that Julio polished.
Good morning, Kimberly.
And we did an experimental cleaning on this piano. Usually when we clean the soundboard area, if we're not removing the strings, like on this piano, it's not in in the budget to remove the strings. Like, I mean, obviously that would be ideal, but sometimes budget doesn't allow for that. We just do our best to get under there with cleaners and with different things that just, you know, we get in between the strings, or we shove under the strings from the bass side, and just clean it as well as we can. And usually it does a decent job, but we can't do a really great job like we can when we remove the strings and the plate, especially. Then we can refinish the soundboard and make it just fresh new wood and lacquered and beautiful. But where that is not in the budget on this piano, what we did is we took the piano outside. Of course, we took the lid off, put the piano upright on its side, on that side, and we taped off all of the plate because again, it's on this project, it's not in the budget to refinish the plate either. And we used baking soda. It was the first time that we'd done this. I think this is going to be a regular thing for pianos that we redo at this level. Of course, pianos that we do at a higher level, we'll take off the strings and we'll refinish the entire soundboard like is ideal. But pianos at this level, I think this is going to become a regular thing, where we use baking soda to spray blast the action clean. It was so dirty under here that it was like a decades old mess of dust mixed with like grease.
It was goopy.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, that's right. Goopy mess that was like caked on the soundboard that you cannot get off with just kind of cleaners and stuff that we shove under the strings. But the baking soda did a beautiful job. So I think this side of removing the strings and using sandpaper to redo the soundboard, this is probably the best option. The only regret that I have about this is I think we should have taped off the bridge, the graphite on the bridge. So traditionally, the bridge has at least this portion of the bridge has graphite that is painted on. And while we taped off the plate so that we didn't remove the paint on the plate with soda blasting, we didn't tape off the bridge, which is actually not that big a deal, again, from a functional standpoint, but from a traditional standpoint, that black is supposed to be there. So, oh well, too bad. We learn, we move on, we do it differently the next time. But from what I've heard, that black on the soundboard, originally the idea was to lubricate the bridge so that be kind of a permanent lubricant for the string to be able to sort of glide back and forth as you tune it or whatever on the bridge, and it provides that the graphite provides that permanent slippery surface. But that later piano technicians realized that it doesn't actually serve that purpose. It doesn't actually do anything. But by then it was too late, and it was already traditional. And so to this day, bridges are still blackened with graphite as sort of a tradition. I'm sure that there are people out there that claim that it does serve that purpose that the original designers thought that it would. I don't really know.
I was wondering if you just soda blast through the strings.
Yes, great question. Yes, we did. Okay. Let's see how the hammers are. Hey, Scott, what would be an issue? What do you think about the Shank?
You're all lined up, ready to go.
It's not going all the way through.
I think it's okay.
I've seen it on other rebuilt pianos.
Yeah. It's not ideal, but I think it's okay. I
Right.
think that that the glue and the shank will be will again functionally it'll hold just fine.
I think we're ready then.
So what have you done so far, Scott?
So I lined up the jig like we were talking about. To get the second one, I kind of measured the action against the jig to make sure the distance was the same on both sides. So now should have a perfectly straight line, perfectly parallel to the action, and we're ready to glue everything in.
Nice.
So you want me to do a few, or?
Yeah.
All right. Next to your stool.
So how many points does this jig? How many straight edges?
3,
Yeah, I think it's
I
3.
guess. So this bottom one here that it's sitting on, this metal part here it goes up against, and then this one here that the top leans against. And then I like putting a clamp here just because I've bumped it before, and then you have to redo all your measurements. So
Oh, smart.
that helps.
Clamp it down.
And then the action is usually heavy enough that it'll stay in place, but you don't want to bump that either.
There's a problem with the action not staying in place. You could use a hot melt glue gun and just kind of weld 2 points on either end, because it's a temporary glue, comes right off, but it does hold it from bumps.
Oh, that's smart too.
That's a good idea. Well, while Scott does a few, do you wanna
We could heat up a hot melt glue gun.
you wanna do that?
We could, it just would keep it, it's a
Yeah.
little insurance.
I like that idea though. Never thought of that.
Scott's done this lots of times.
Okay, so now I'm going to take this off. So we got our jig all set. This tape off.
Good morning, Sherry Davidson.
And lots of different kind of glues that could be used. Scott, why do we use Type Bond Quick and Thick?
It's the one.
Mostly because of how thick it is. It just helps hold everything together. It dries pretty fast, which is helpful when you're doing a bunch. Yeah, it just works really well. It doesn't make a mess, which some of the, like a regular yellow glue would be a lot messier. So, I like to put a little bit in the hammer in the hole there, and then a little bit on the shank. Seems to help them go together a bit easier.
Is that bottle going to be enough?
Maybe, maybe not.
A few more. Do you want to put it in a little cup?
Just bulk the action.
It's a little more convenient in the bottle if I can get it to come out.
Yeah, we're gonna glue it. Let's try to get a good angle. It's a cool angle, Scott.
Okay, here we go. Put it in there.
Come see it from this side.
You
It's
gotta,
really close.
gotta move fairly quick because it dries so fast.
Mm.
And make sure glue gets all the way around. Line it up. extra glue, we can get rid of that. And there it is. If it's not perfectly straight up and down, you can correct it a little bit later, but try to get it as close as you can. That's all there is. Move on to the next one.
Do that 87 more times. Did we see any hammer hanging at the factory?
I don't think so. I was hoping to.
I don't think so.
I don't think we did either.
Can't remember.
I believe their processes are pretty similar to this.
Yeah. There's probably a station where someone just.
They don't have a big machine, they just put them all in.
Seems like they've figured out a machine for just about everything else. And how much are you worrying about glue cleanup as you go, and how much do you just clean it up after?
So at the back end of the hole, it leaves kind of a bunch that it's pushed out. I like to clean that off, but mostly just so it doesn't drip on the jig.
Yeah.
Other than that, I can clean everything up after.
Okay.
Just want to keep the jig clean.
And you, one thing that that strikes me as important to emphasize is that you want the hammer just sort of lightly resting on the straight edges,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to bearing against the straight edges, like forcing the straight edge one way or the other.
Yeah, you don't want to put any spring into the wood.
Spring.
Or after you take it out, it'll move.
Perfect way to say it.
Definitely.
Did you catch that, Jake? Okay. Good morning, Julio.
Good morning. Curtis is wondering if you could give us an overview of what you saw at the factory. How do you do that? There's so much.
It'd take a while.
Okay. So,
Curtis, I'll send you a link to the pictures so you can see them too.
so the first factory that we went to, Hailun has their own action factory, and that was really, really impressive. They basically ship in raw wood from Austria. It's sawn into planks. You can still see the bark on it. The planks are an inch thick, something like that, and every layer of wood is separated by some sort of little spacer, and they're giant. They're about this tall, and they're probably 10 or 12 feet long, something like that. And then maybe 8 feet wide, just huge shipments of wood. And the reason that it's Austrian, what was he saying? Because the growth pattern is
So
ideal for
The altitude of the mountains they grow in is higher, so the trees grow slower, and I think therefore more consistent, a little more dense.
Okay.
Just better wood.
Kinda cool.
And it was hornbeam that they were shipping in.
There's a few different kinds, yeah.
And so the wood then went into a drying room in those big giant shipments, and they dried it there for a few months, and that was a nice toasty, very climate controlled. It was dry in there. Huge room, probably double the size of this room, where
That's
they just had totally full of these shipments of Austrian wood. And then from there, the wood went to they sawed it down to manageable, usable units of planks of wood. I guess they were different sizes. They were some were this big and some were
that big?
larger. Yeah, maybe some are this big. This would be a big one. Of course, they were thinner than this.
Mhm.
Anyway, and then from there they'd kind of go out to different machines, where the machines would either make flanges, or they'd make jacks, or make back checks, or make all sorts of different components. And then there'd be a row of a lot of the procedures were automated. So, and it was really impressive, super precise. Everything was really well thought out. Just way impressive. Curtis, it would have been awesome to have you there. And then they've got table after table after table of little Chinese ladies who were like bushing. They would bush three flanges at a time. They had their little techniques where they'd put, so flanges are kind of U-shaped. So they'd put, was it 3 flanges at a time they did?
I think so.
So they had a machine or a little jig that they'd put one flange in, they'd put another flange here and a third flange kind of in between, and then they'd put their felt through all 3, and then slice in between, put a little bit of glue on the felt, put it through, slice in between, and then they had 3 bushed at a time. And they had jigs like that for like making hammer butts. They had a big clamp that they put all of the hammer butts together in. Well, and actually, maybe I should start first by saying how they made the wooden hammer butt in the first place. So they're not manufactured individually, but it's just a long rail. We saw them about that long. It was just this shape here. And then they would
slice it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you were explaining that there's another thing, but I don't know what it was that you said that they did that.
They did that on a lot of things.
Like the big hammer.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Rather than just making
A separate hammer.
individual hammers at a time, they would make one long hammer and then slice it into all of these different.
Imagine how that would sound.
One big hammer. Boom. So slice the hammer butts, and then all of these different steps. So there's felt strip there. There's a felt strip there. There's leather that covers that. There's this felt here. There's the insertion of the catcher in there. There's felt there. So they would have jigs for all of these. So after these hammers, for example, were sliced, they'd put it into this jig where all the hammers were together. They'd clamp them all together, and then paint a strip of glue at this point here and at this point down here, and then lay the leather across all of them, and then slice them. Was that by hand, or did they have a machine that?
I didn't see that part.
I think it was a machine that sliced them and did a really precise, beautiful job. They did that also for back checks. They were manufacturing back checks. And so the back checks all came together, and they laid the felt across all the back checks, and so there was like one giant back check, and then sliced it. So that was the
They did that a lot.
that was the action. Yeah. They've got efficiency down. What's that?
That one wasn't as pretty.
Yeah.
So, an issue I was finding on this last shank, because it's a different size, the hammer wasn't fitting on quite the same, so I had to adjust the hole a little bit with this tool. So,
You want
there's,
to show what that tool is?
yeah, it has these little cutting edges on it, so you can stick it in the hole and kind of enlarge it.
Oh.
So there's a good chance we'll have to do that on a lot of these. The different shank size.
And it's tapered.
Right.
So, Curtis, that's the Action Factory. Then at the actual piano factory, which is only what, 10 minutes away, something like that. How would you describe the factory?
Big.
Well thought out.
Well thought out. Big and well thought out.
Stacy, do you have a bigger hot melt glue gun around here? I got this out of the craft closet.
That's about how big mine are.
He found some hot melt glue sticks, but they're the bigger ones.
Oh, I don't know. I'm so sorry.
I thought for sure we had a hot melt glue gun sitting around here somewhere, but I can't lay my hands on it.
It works pretty well without it.
Yeah, as long as Stacy doesn't sneeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't let me fall.
Hey Don, try, you know that cabinet in the back corner? That just kind of
Behind the white
has-
doors? Or upstairs?
No, down here, in the, next to the architectural desk.
Oh, okay.
It seems like maybe in some of those bins up top might be a place to look, or you could even look with the tools.
It's a
all the
lot.
power
Every new
tools.
set of hammers would do this too.
Trying
It's a
to-
lot.
I've checked that, but I haven't maybe hit every box. I know I've seen a cord in one of these, and I thought I had one in the up, but it's either buried or maybe I had one in my trunk.
I'm not sure. So, some of the highlights I would say would be restringing. That was probably, that was maybe the most interesting to watch. So it takes an experienced restringer about 12 hours to restring a piano, and it takes them 45 minutes to do a whole piano. That was amazing. Stacy will be posting that video. We watched the guy for a good 5 or 7 minutes, something like that.
How
And
many
he,
did they do?
what was it, like 3/4 of the bass section
Yeah.
in 7 minutes? So about that. Yeah. It was amazing.
Was he doing it all by hand, or did he have like power tools to help him out?
A big tool.
Had a pretty cool machine tool thing.
This thing was like on a big arm, went over the piano, and so the pins were already in the piano, and he would just kind of stick the string inside this tool, and it would make the coil for him. So we could just
You just set it.
go through them really quick.
Hmm.
All he had to do was put the string in, measure it, cut it, and then kind of stick it in this machine.
For 88, actually, it's more than 88. It's like 3 times that.
So I'm guessing that guy, I don't really know, but I would guess that guy, like the only restringing that he's ever known is that restringing.
Yeah.
And he's probably never worked in a rebuilding shop like this, or he's probably not even familiar with rebuilding shops. So I'm guessing that if that guy ever came here and saw us restringing and saw that it took us 5 to 7 minutes to do one string,
It'd just be painful.
it would be painful.
Good morning, Marlene Peterson.
And then he's just like, good thing I brought my tool.
Jake, you want to do one?
Sure.
Scott, you
Yeah,
want to walk him through
Jake.
it?
So the first thing you want to do is put it on the shank without glue and see if it's going to fit in the jig right.
Alright.
Just do a dry fit. And I'm guessing it's not going to fit quite.
I made the tool.
You should be able to kind of bend the hammer forward a bit. Just have a little bit of room. Sorry. This one might be okay. That's the other thing about the shank not being quite long enough. It doesn't kind of support the hammer quite as well before you have it glued on.
It's amazing.
Okay. And then you see there's kind of a gap where the shank doesn't go
Right.
through. So I've been putting kind of extra glue in there to fill up that space.
Gotcha.
So when you put glue inside the hammer, just kind of put a little bit extra.
Those are blistered knuckles.
Are they the new ones that we had? Or are they the original ones?
Scott, have you bolstered knuckles before?
Haven't.
You know the theory? You know the idea?
I know the idea. I don't know the process.
I'll show you. See how nice and round those knuckles are?
Did you put the material underneath the leather? Bryce was asking about that yesterday.
Jake did that. He did this set. Right, Jake?
Cool.
Yep.
Nice, Jake.
Bolster these knuckles?
He did.
The ones that we pulled out a few weeks ago.
Is that enough glue, Scott?
You probably want a bit more. That's probably okay. It just needs to barely go on. Twist it around a bit. Yeah.
So you don't want it to slide in there or to, this is what Scott was talking about, that you don't want to introduce any spring in the shank. So you want it to be fairly loose, fairly
So you
loosely
see there's not
rested
really any
against
glue on the
straight
outside
edges.
here. Let's add a bit more to the shank. Just kind of a big glob on top. It's also easier if we have a full bottle of glue. See, then that gives us a nice, it's called a glue collar, a little circle around the outside.
Gotcha.
So that's what you're looking for.
Okay.
That kind of helps hold it in. 'Cause it's such a small amount of wood connection. You want a lot of glue to keep it in place.
Gotcha.
The back looks really good. Okay. Another one.
Where's that new bottle of glue?
All the ones we have right now are kind of half full.
They're all, everyone stops when they're half full. Is that what happens? Oh. It's funny. So we
It's
need
always
to
better to
combine
use the
them.
full one.
We need to
Yeah.
combine
I
some
think
then.
that's what Brigham's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Always does that with like
Se le pone aquí,
stuff like that.
y este más tiene arma de acero. Este es el estilo. Ahí, yo te quité este, me hice un corte para utilizarlo y se lo volví a poner.
Like you have with the P.
Like Biden bolt.
I think we have. We just go through it so
¿Está bien?
fast.
¿Te gusta?
Mm.
Porque no hay router para esta. Para esta router pensamos.
Tedious
¿Ah, sí?
to grab and try and
Bueno,
Yeah.
pero si te gusta, es muy fácil nada más reparar esto, se le pone el filo.
We probably should.
Nada más la repara
depending on
clip, este clip. Y tiene resistencia y todo.
It's pretty cool.
Bueno, poquito, no mucho.
Yeah, that one's pretty empty, that bottle. So.
It's probably okay.
Turn it around a couple times just to spread the glue around. That's the purpose of doing that, is just to move the glue
Give it
around.
a little color, little glue color.
Yeah, that looks better. Then you want to push the bottom up to that straight edge. Yeah.
This is cool. I've never seen this done before. Scott, how many times have you done this now?
At least a dozen.
At least a dozen. That would be great.
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay. ¿Te gusta? Digo, con el
Let's check and see
con
if
la
it's gonna
cinta bien,
fit first
como quiera, se lo mandamos a-
before we add the glue.
Aquí a la lista. La otra está lista. La otra nada más está cortada con la medida de la otra.
Okay, well,
So if it's too tight, you have to kind of. How loose should it be? Should it be fairly snug? Like how snug is too? Like does it matter or?
So that's part of the reason we use this glue, because
Yeah,
it'll fill
just
up
to
those
kind
kind of
fill it
gaps.
in. Okay.
But so you want it loose enough that it'll fit in the jig, and you still have a little bit of play,
You need some play.
But-
Okay.
still snug enough that it's going to hold the right angle.
That makes sense.
¿Quieres probar?
you don't wanna try a Chinese, try it. I think so. Kind of a Chinese bait.
Sorry, Stacy.
What is this?
You eat.
It's like a big
No question.
Just eat it.
It's a Chinese.
Eat it.
It's a Chinese.
Well, that's what it is, just eat it.
Sorry, Stacy.
Thank you.
That's what we did all week long, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, we never questioned anything we ate.
It still has eyeballs on it. Don't ask what it is, just eat it. Is it enough? It is enough?
There's like a seed in it.
I said, is it like a nut? No, it's like a date.
It's a date.
Almond kind of nut thing.
I hope that made it garbage. Okay.
Is that working any better? That bottle?
We need a fuller.
It's not great.
It's not full enough to be effective. I hate to combine just like 3 of them. Just tip them all upside down.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Try
That's, yeah.
that one.
taste. Like a combination of a fig and a date.
It kind of is, isn't it? Like fate.
A date.
Dig.
Or a date. Both of those are actual words.
Okay.
That's all right. You get it later.
No. How do I get this seed out?
Nice. It'll chip off later. Don't worry about it too much.
Or use ideas, use the dowel and see if you can just push it through. But
Oh, just fix it. That's
And
not a
let the
bad
dowel
idea.
down.
Creative.
I'm not
pretty
sure
creative.
that
See if it'll work.
the dowel will fit clear through.
Let's go. I'd like a little bit more of a glue collar
The
than that.
outside is kind of like a wax.
How much is it
Waxy
moving?
paper.
So that glue collar.
That's pretty tight. I like more movement than that. Just try enlarging the hole just a little bit.
That glue collar is an important.
Thing.
So kind of stick it in until it stops, then it'll cut all the
Gotcha.
way around.
So maybe get a little bit more glue on there.
like you to shoot to get to the point where you have a good idea of exactly how much glue and exactly how many rotations. Some people I know, they believe in just one rotation. You just want to put it on, spin it around 360 degrees, no more. And they're kind of putting it on at the same rate as they twist, so that by the time they're done with their 360 degree rotation, it's to the correct point on the shank.
So how much movement should?
That's pretty good. That's again just to make sure it's not kind of being forced into the jig. It's just sitting in there loosely.
That's better.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
looking good.
That's a lot better.
Well, I think let's end the Facebook Live broadcast right there. I think everybody gets an idea of what's going on. And feel free to contact us if you have any requests, something that you'd like to see. We choose these Facebook Live topics really based on what we have going in the shop, what the next needs in the shop happen to be. But if you are interested in something, and it's something that we do most everything, anyway, depends what's going on in the shop. Feel free to make a request, and we might get to it. So come join us next Wednesday morning at we usually start about 6:15. So come check it out. Thanks for watching.